All right. Welcome, Felicia. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really glad you're able to join me today. That makes me happy. And I see that we are both representing
Yes, we are.
our respective brands. So that's nice. That's not something that happens often. And I'm glad you are representing your brand, because that's the big reason we're here is we like to do episodes where instead of, sort of talking about all of these what ifs and all this, sort of thought leadership stuff, not that you're not a thought leader, because you are, but you're going to actually share with us real stuff, right? What we consider the wins from the They Learn You Win, the way that your organization is winning as far as learning goes, some of the projects you've done, some of the things that you guys work on, some of the things you think about. So with that, I'd love you just to start, let me know, like if there was like your favorite thing that you've done over the last year or a couple years that you're most proud of. And we can start with that. And I'm sure people would love to hear it.
Okay, sounds good. So, wow, favorite thing, because there's been so many favorites. I would say a couple come to mind. One, and it really gets to the simplicity of an approach, and I could talk more about it later around what we're doing at Scooter's Coffee, really to get the engagement at the individual store level. So we introduced a simple way to train on how to sell to the customers, how to upsell. So when you think about if someone orders a latte and there's all the different questions and combinations of questions you can ask in selling that drink, we simplify that method and we introduce something that we call a quick upsell, and it just really went down to the approach of assuming certain drink sizes, being able to ask one question to the customer, and this isn't foreign, but it turned out to be a really great benefit, because asking that one clarifying question around what would be whether it's a size or a particular flavor, and then that third question being an add-on. So is it adding additional shot of espresso? Is it a food item? And really training the baristas around at the questions that they ask being those that will actually get answers from the customers and more are most likely to get a yes. So if you think if a person is ordering a mango smoothie, the ask probably isn't, would you like a shot of espresso with that? This is the ask is probably around adding protein powder, but just really something so simple, operationalizing that and actually making training courses around it really went a long way. And so that was one right away when after joining a company, I was able to work a project to work on. And then since then, we've redesigned all of the e-learning for the baristas, really working on making things more engaging for them. Short, very, very short courses where they could be able to go in and take training on a product that's coming out in less than a 3-minute course. But adding things like simulations, how do you where a barista could practice ringing up an order in a virtual setting right on their phone through an e-learning course, making change even for the customers
Mm-hmm.
through that same way, with being able to do that before they actually get on the station and engage with the machines. So
Yeah, I love that, because we've been doing some research here at Skooks around the frontline employee experience and the learning and the training that goes into that. And one of the things that has come back is the biggest thing that we found, both from employees and employers, is that there's very little time and opportunity to practice any of these skills that we're putting to this particular type of audience, which you understand it's, quick onboarding, get up there, get running. And so the idea of these simulations, like, hey, why don't you give this a shot before we put you in front of a customer? I love to hear that, because in my own head, I'd love to hear any more about that particular program, because I think of myself, and you could tell me all of the things that are available, all the different shot add-ons, the different ancillary items, and I could understand what those are. But the ability to actually ask somebody if they want that in a way that engages that customer and makes them, I feel like that might be hard. I know it's hard for me. I don't know, maybe it's not hard for other folks, but beyond training them what the stuff is there a bit about like how to go about it and how to get people to, because I'm terrible at making that kind of an ask.
one of the things that we do first is by letting them know, hey, there's an art to this. The art is the art selling, and really it's around having that comfort level. So in the training, here is if this is what the customer orders, here are the appropriate questions that you would ask. That again, what are you more likely to get a yes to? And so, like the example I gave with the smoothie, the question for the smoothie might be a protein
Right.
add on, or it might be a food item, and just being able to role play that with the baristas and having them be able to practice that, we incorporated it even with training on things such as limited time offers. Here are barista talking points. So when you're learning how to make this particular new promotional drink that's out, here are some key talking points around that drink and accompaniments. So as you're learning about the product, here are some particular ways that you could sell it to the customer for those that are doing that order taking role. So I think it really just goes around giving the information and just allowing that practice, because when you're able to practice it and get comfortable with it, then it becomes more natural when those questions come from the customer. But we preface it by saying listen, because when you listen and you're taking in what that customer is saying, what they're sharing, what they're asking about, then that's going to help you to be able to go through those steps and make it be more natural, so it doesn't seem as robotic.
Yeah. That right there is the key. I think that the listening piece is the thing that's going to fix it, make it stick. What about, and do you also sort of in that training, is there any about like pushback, like how to handle, clearly there's like, if the answer is no, that's fine and move on, and how to, but I mean, is there a little bit around that, like, so that the baristas are also comfortable knowing that I'm going to make this ask and I might not get the answer I want?
Yeah, and we tell them right from the beginning that hey, some customers will come in, whether they're a brand new customer or they are customer a regular. And we really train our baristas around the fact that coffee, in our case, is a loyalty business, and you will have people that once they've come a couple of times, you will be their Scooter's Coffee. You will be the shop that they're going to come to all the time. They're going to stop by on their way to work, and or their way home from picking up the kids, and so you'll get to know those people. We have baristas, which I find it proud, and it kind of gives me goosebumps to say they can recognize a customer by the sound of their car engine. Oh, Bob's pulled up. We can hear his truck, or the motorcycle has
Hmm.
pulled up. And so they get that connected with people. So when the person pulls up, they're like, "Hey, Bob. Okay, you're gonna have your usual large XYZ today. Come around." They don't even need to engage with that customer. You really being able to go back in and again with that listening piece, a person who comes up, and if they're new but maybe they're familiar with another brand or another chain, and they said, yeah, they're looking for something like X drink at another place, we said, well, baristas, okay, so this person knows what they want. They may not know what that equivalent is as Scooter's Coffee, but you could give them that suggestion. Again, you don't have to go into other menu items. Here is what we have that's similar to that. Like it large, like it hot. Even the way you suggest that is may change if it's depending on weather outside. If it's a 90-degree summer day, they may not necessarily want it hot. Now there are some who will, but maybe they want it iced or blended. And again, it's just here's that piece. Let's add it, and if it's that espresso best drink, okay, the only question you may need to ask at that point is would they like to add an extra shot of espresso to it, and
Hmm.
then have them direct them around to the window, or as we say at Scooter's Coffee, scoot on around to the window.
I like it. Is there sort of like um, I want to be delicate. Is there like a sort of a rival brand conversion chart that you guys use? So when someone comes in speaking the language of another chain, the baristas can sort of internalize that and go, I know what you mean. Like,
Oh no, we don't do that
okay.
intentionally,
Okay.
because we stand apart in our space at
Yeah. Oh,
Scooter's
of course.
Coffee, as most people would, and we do have baristas who have worked in other brands, and so for them, and we'll share with our store managers in their training, or with our franchisee in their training. You have that person, you don't want to shut that down. Let's just have that thought,
Right.
really get them to understand. But for our baristas, the key is that they understand what the menu is. They understand what the drinks are, what they're made of, because then when that person comes in and they ask for that drink, whether it's at a different brand or they just have something in mind because they're new to our chain, and one of the beauty, I guess, or wonderful things I like to say about Scooter's Coffee is the fact that we're growing so quickly and we're popping up in a lot of new markets that people either love us or they don't know us. And so when they don't know us, it gives us a chance to educate them on who we
Hmm.
are and what we have. And if they're used to getting something, even that they make at home, whatever that favorite beverage is, we most likely can duplicate that and make it a great experience for you, not just through what you'll get handed to you at the window, but the engagement you'll be able to have with the team.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a great opportunity when if the baristas understand how much of a relationship the customers have with not just coffee in general, but then your coffee. Like that's you know, there's it's hard to think of many other products, services that are, as like you mentioned earlier, so like loyalty driven, and it's a habit, and people want the whole experience to be part of that habit, right? They want, it isn't just, oh, I just want the coffee. It's like, no, the whole experience of getting the coffee and talking is that's part of the experience. It sounds like you guys are very much zeroed in on that, creating those
Hmm.
relationships. I want to come back if I can a little bit to the simulation part. Like, what does that look like? Is it animated avatars? Is it a click through? Is it sometimes like one-on-one role plays in person? Like, what does the simulation look like?
It's a combination of all three.
Oh,
So
okay.
in our materials that will go out, where there would be, for in an example of an LTO, we may have some notes in there in the guide that the manager can use when engaging with the team. In our e-learning, it will be a combination of the animated avatars. We do use those where you that customer, a quote unquote, is giving you the barista order, and then in the course they may type in what the in the into the POS what that order is, and so this course is guiding them through entering the order that's being shared to the customer so that they can go through and practice adding those that item in, making modifiers, and going through the process of ringing it up when the customer gets to the window. So I think in most cases, being able to have all of those ways that it's addressed. So through the e-learning, you can do that practice where it's just you and a computer, and if you mess up, you're just messing up with the computer or that e-learning course. And then when you get on the station with your trainer, whether it's the manager or the barista in the store, now it's that chance again, still safe space. You're not engaged with the customer yet. You're not making this drink for the customer yet. You get that simulation live, real world chance to do that too. And then once you're through that ongoing role play, we don't always create that type of training for every single limited time offer or promotional campaign, which is why we'll incorporate those really in the general training for a manager. And that's part of really what we lead with them. And this is how you drive promotions. This is how you drive training, because it works for both. I guess when you set up a really strong standard that can be duplicated, it works whether it's a core item or a promotion.
Yeah. And for anybody who's not familiar with sort of restaurant, quick service industry, anything like that, LTO, and you did say it a few times, but I want to make sure people get the connection, limited time offer. And I say this because if you're not in this industry or these industries, but you're looking to see how other companies are doing things. If you ever hear someone like Felicia or in this industry where they talk about how they're training their people on LTOs, you want to pay attention to that because it is like a microcosm of how to do training. It's this new thing that's coming, right? Limited time offer. So it's new. There's obviously a huge push from the company for it, right? There's a lot of effort that went into creating it and pushing it, and people need to learn it rather quickly. And there's a lot of focus on getting it right because it's timed with media and all this other stuff. And so just I've run into this a few times with other restaurants, and it always fascinates me, this ability to ramp up, get people trained on this LTO, and then have this the success with people being able to properly sell that item when it's time. So just for those of you who are not necessarily in the restaurant industry, don't shy away from
Mhm.
learning, because it's I love like sort of how everything's compressed into that. Would you say that's like when those come up, do you feel like that's like a unique beast for you guys? Like we got to really focus on that.
Oh, absolutely. We have standards in place around getting the existing team trained before the date that the product launches for a soft sale. And we will even have training, different guidelines around your new baristas. Because in our industry, when you think about the pace that people are hired and onboarded, it's
Mm,
almost daily. So you may have
yeah.
someone who we'll instruct the store managers, get that barista trained on the limited time offer before you go into some of the core items, just so they have that awareness. You don't want the customer to ask this barista in training, "Hey, I would like to try the Lucky Leprechaun," which is something we're promoting right now at Scooter's Coffee, and the barista doesn't know because this their first day or second day and they don't
Right.
even know what that is or that we're offering it. So getting that information to them at a minimum is so important. And to your point, where you just laid it out, so which was spot on, we're doing that with a mass number of employees in our in our training records. We have just around 12,600 active employees across the system in our store, 761 open, active, engaged stores in the system. And so that number of people to get ramped up and all be on the same page when that day one hits on, hey, we got to get everybody, make sure that everyone knows what the promotional item is important to do. It's a big task, but it does take following that, really setting a cadence and setting expectations in place to help drive it.
Yeah. Nice. Um, yeah. The number of employees, the number of stores, that's pretty impressive already. What's the breakdown? Is it all company stores? Do you have any franchises?
So we are primarily franchised.
Okay.
We're of that number, I estimate somewhere around 740-ish of those are all franchised.
Okay. So then just take all the stuff you just talked about, then and add 10x complexity on top of that, because you're dealing, and I say this in other podcasts when we've talked about this, but now you're dealing with people who technically don't work for you,
Mhm.
right? They work for somebody else, and you're still trying to please customers who don't care that you're these people don't work for
Absolutely.
your company, because as far as they know, scooters is scooters, and it says it on the building, and that's what it is. It's wild to watch companies really try to manage. It's not a disconnect. It's just the uniqueness of that model of all of these different places that are owned by different operators. But as far as the consumer knows, and this is what you want, is that it's all the same experience,
Mhm.
right? And it. Well, I'm not going to tell you how hard that can be, but I've seen it time and time again. So that just to me is more impressive about all the stuff that you've already talked about. When you're doing
Mhm.
that kind of environment, are there any, like, if and you can say pass if you want, but are there any specific challenges that have arisen from being a franchise model? Do you have any difficulty
Mhm.
sort of getting everybody on board?
I think with the franchise model, and I've been fortunate enough to work in organizations that have franchise models, at least for probably at least the last 17 years of my career in training. And so the key is with franchisee from day one. So when they sign, and we at Scooters Coffee, we bring in franchisees for training to before they open their first store into the office, and talk about our model and what makes a successful first store opening, and what really sets you to grow your organization. And we talk about the fact that they are business owners. We ask them from day one, what are your goals? What do you want to do from as a result of joining Screw's Coffee and deciding to open a Screw's Coffee in your neighborhood, or multiple, as if that is what they desire to do
Hmm.
as they grow. But really just speaking to the fact that, yes, you're an entrepreneur, you're a small business owner. Buying into a model helps make that process so much easier, because you don't have to figure out what menu to have if you're wanting to do your own coffee shop. You don't have to figure out
Right.
the menu. You don't have to figure out all the other things. We figured it out for you, and we'll provide you training on how to do it from A to Z. And it was just, but still allow understanding that these employees, like you mentioned, the baristas work for you, the store managers work for you. We're here to support you throughout that process. We set that expectation, and we share that with franchisees. We have a very high touch model with them, and I think that's what helps with that process. And so you run into, if I won't say it's not without any
Of
um,
course.
hiccups that occur, but for those who really understand, and it's starting from day one, this is what it takes to be successful. Even when we've run into situations where they didn't maybe follow the model, and I'm sure anyone working in a franchise organization could say the same. When you circle back to, well, here is a opportunity or maybe a gap in execution, is usually just related to something that franchisee veered off course from, that went with the model. And once we bring them back to they can see, and they're like, yep, you know what, I remember this in training. We this is now I remember why we aren't meeting this mark in this other area.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine very often in any franchise organization that those instances are malicious by any means, like a franchise owner deliberately saying, no, I refuse to do X. It's more just, kind of keep a track of things. Do you find, uh, if is the challenges that arise, are they more likely to happen for a single operator, or somebody who like operates, and I don't know what your largest operator is, but like, let's say somebody operates 10, 20 locations or something. Is it, I feel in my head, and I want to know, I'm literally
Mhm.
asking for my own education. In my head, I feel like the operators that have multiple stores, they're already sort of thinking like you guys think corporate, because they're managing this, so they get it. And I feel like the one store operators might be a little more likely to get disconnected because they're not thinking like that. Am I correct in that? And I don't know, I have no idea.
I mean, in my personal experience, it happens in both scenarios.
Oh, there you go.
You have in some cases, the larger a franchise organization becomes, with that franchisee that has 10, 20, 50 stores, they're like you mentioned, they're building out their own support team, and they've got to stay close to it. That doesn't that they have those field operators, those district managers, or whomever, that in the case of a smaller franchisee that just has one, two, maybe three locations, is playing that role. It's the same challenge. So if you've got 1 or 10 stores that you're, of course, it's good. You're going to approach it and look at it the same way, and really it's a store by store approach. And in cases, you may have a franchise organization that have 50 stores, they may have one that has an opportunity. We see something's not happening here in that portfolio, we would still address that with the franchise owner the same way we would if that franchise owner just had the one store and was off
Got it.
course. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess the real problem arises if like someone's operating 50 stores, and the problem that they're having is originating from the top, and so it disseminates out all the way across all the
Hmm.
stores, and then that's a
Hmm.
bigger challenge. But yeah, the unique individual locations, you're still going to address those the way you would anything else. I get that. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so one of the things you also mentioned at the beginning, you were talking about like the program that you're most happy with at the moment, most proud of, um, or your favorite, I guess is what we said. But what are you seeing as a result? Like you talked about the upsells and the add-ons and things like getting baristas comfortable with that process. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you gave me like a time of about, what was it, 1 year, 2 years, where you've put some of the stuff in place?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you don't obviously have to give any hard numbers, but I'm just curious to know, like, what are some of the things that you're seeing that you're really proud of, like, the work that you put in.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go back and just mention around our launch of, we like I was speaking to us, redoing our e-learning and really rolling that out, really starting with the barista level, and we did that process. So we launched that last year, and so going through that process of redoing all of the e-learning, also had part with that. Here's a new learning management system. Training prior to that point wasn't, it was a focus, but I won't say it was as big of a focus when it came to, let's look at metrics. Let's follow up on metrics. Let's follow up on metrics for the franchisees, store managers. So part of that, and another piece I'd add in as far as being proud of, we built out a whole dashboard of metrics for reporting for franchisees. So in the same place they go to look at their sales and speed and the other metrics, we added in a dashboard that they could go through and filter how they were performing in their training metrics. So what is your training completion percentages, and really be able to see by course, by the store level, and look at that as a snapshot. Again, same place you're looking every day to see how you're performing in some of these other areas. And that gave a whole new emphasis to training. And that's where we really started to see a focus of people going into the training site as a result, completing training, wanting to drive the needle, and starting to even see those numbers pair up to how our stores performing when it comes to sales and speed, some of the key metrics that are monitored. And so I think that piece of it, having that in your face, look at the metrics, really has helped to drive some of those results and changes. It's sort of that approach of thinking, how do you turn a cruise ship? Can you turn a cruise ship?
Yeah.
Cruise ships do turn. They turn very slowly though, and
Hmm.
so it was the same situation where we started with, I mentioned how many active employees are in the system and how many have active stores. When we first launched the new learning management system, new e-learning, that number wasn't at 764 stores, and
Hmm.
some of those other numbers weren't there, but we're now there. And it's been with, we've seen it happen with, I guess, over a process of about a year now, and it continues to go forward from there. And I think that's part of the step of, in someone in my role leading training, of course you want to see it happen overnight. That's part of the caution that you have to have for yourself in thinking, what's more important, is execution and absorption more important, or the numbers more important? If you go after the proper execution and absorption, you'll see the change in numbers as a result of that. So allow there some grace for the teams in the stores,
Mhm.
grace for yourself and allow that time to change, and it will happen.
I mean, I would encourage anybody listening or watching, if you want to rewind the last few minutes and listen to that again, because you hit on some of the biggest key items that I've been trying to drive home for forever. First off, the last bit you're talking about is, yeah, it isn't going to all happen overnight. Like everything is stepped toward. For years as an analyst in an advisory capacity, you try to give companies advice, tell them, and it has this idea of a future state of, this is how it could be, right? This is what it should be. This is what we're all pointing to. And a lot of companies look at that future state and go, we're never going to get there. So why bother? And
Mhm.
it's, no, everything you do is a step in that direction, and it takes time, and exactly what you're saying there. And then the other piece, which to me is just warms my heart, is the whole metrics piece. It's so beautiful. Like, these are things that your company is already capturing, right? These are all metrics that exist. And it's the idea that, hey, maybe the training should be pointed at those things, and then we can show the results. Because whether you're talking about franchisees, operators, or you're talking about an organization that has all internal employees, one of the things we hear a lot is managers, team leaders, they they don't promote learning sometimes because they feel like, oh, it's in the way of my team doing their work, or here's this other thing that they want us to do, and I don't really. And then that attitude just trickles down through everyone. But if you're able to say, listen, here's what happens as a result of the training, all the numbers that you're interested in go this direction, oh, okay, now I'm on board, now it makes sense, I get why we're after this. And then even the learners themselves, it's like, this is why this is important, this is what happens when we do this the right way, we all win when we get these things lined up. So the idea that you've got these very specific metrics, and again, stuff that you guys were already tracking, right, from a business performance standpoint, and to be able to align the training to those things, it solves so many issues that companies face. I love all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, who's like, I'm trying to think here. Previously, when you're sort of shifting things, a lot of the learning, like what was it before? Was it like physical media? Was it before you sort of transformed through an LMS? And did you change a lot of the content? Like what was that transition like from a content standpoint?
Yeah, so we did have an LMS in place. It wasn't as robust as the one we
Okay.
transitioned into, and then the learning itself was more of, I'd say, click log in, click read. We went to something that was more of an engaging format, in building in, as I gave you the example, like the simulations, and having things that, as you're going through this, you're not just clicking and reading, but something makes you stop and do an activity, or stop and listen to something, or engage with something, even in that short amount of time. So there's this always continuous absorption, but you're involved in it as well. So that was part of what we really focused on when we went to the new format.
Yeah. And is there consideration of the audience themselves? I don't know off the top of my head what your sort of average barista persona is, from like an age,
Mhm.
background, anything like that. Um, but have you over time shifted the content to be more sort of appealing to that
Oh
audience?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We think about the audience, and that's at every level, whether it's an owner and down to the baristas, and it's very different depending on the brand that you're at. And with us, that average age of baristas from around 16, 18, and that's that high school, maybe going into college, but that's not the only
Oh
group.
no.
That's that when you think about the learning. But what we found was not so much focusing on what is the age, or what is that person at that age wanting to learn, because most, you could have a 45-year-old that, like myself, that wants a short snapshot training, the same that, and would catch and engage that person the same way that a 16-year-old barista would. And so we try to take more of an approach around, what's the role, what is
Yeah.
that person's capacity at that role. When you think about what else are all the other things that they have to do, and the other things that the person leading that team has to do as well. And you brought up the point around, you were mentioning something around the managers, and those is the training something that is, I got to do this training in addition to all the other things for my job. One thing we always like to point out is you're training all the time, even when you aren't saying, you've not said this is a training session. You are training every time you hit the headset and you mention to the barista, don't forget to ask the customer about this thing, or you stop somebody and before they're finishing up a drink and you point out a change they may need to make or something, an opportunity for an improvement there, or even when you recognize that person for doing something well as they're working through their day. Those are all training moments.
Yeah.
And so let's as a training team on my end, let's help make this easier for you. Instead of you having to bring that new person in and remember all the things to tell them, let's have you go and actually do these things.
Yeah. It's funny to me, the generational discussions that go on about employees in the workforce, and they say, well, we need to make the content more engaging for the younger generations. I'm like, I mean, I'm an older Gen X. Why? I don't. I like things that are engaging. I wouldn't mind having maybe the learning be shorter, more accessible. Like, why? Just because it was never like that when I was younger, does that mean like I don't get to have that now? Like, what? Essentially, I mean, yes, obviously people are all different, right? We're all humans, but we all kind of want the same things. We want things to be engaged. I want to know what I'm getting as a result. Like, what's the outcome that's desired of me? I want it to fit into my life so it doesn't feel like it's obtrusive. Like, I don't know why when we start to talk about, well, we've got all these younger workers and we need to, it's like, no, we should probably go that direction regardless of who we're after. But yeah, one of the things that I see in sort of this frontline quick service environment is all these kind of training that you're doing. You're also often training people to do like the entire job. Like, they're coming in. A lot of people aren't coming in having been a barista somewhere else, right? They're coming in and it's like, this is their first time in a coffee shop, or sometimes it's their first job at all. What kind of stuff do you have in place for that?
So when we think about somebody who this is their first job, what one of the way we approach it and train them is, what other experiences can you call from with that person. So if you're in high school and this is your first job, you're probably part of some team, or you've been in a club, or you have had to do a project. So how do you
Mhm.
relate those experiences? That's just, and that's kind of a general thought in adult learning. How do you, and even at that age, you're almost at that, when you think about numbers wise, legally adult wise, but there's still some life experience that you can pull back on. And so with the way, thinking about that top down approach with the managers, think about how you have two things you're looking at in the way with someone who this is, as you mentioned, their first job. One, you have an opportunity to mold that person, but not mold them from the standpoint of, okay, they don't have any bad habits we've got to unlearn, but mold them as far as the things you'll be able to pour into them that will give them life experience in addition to work experience. So we're talking about communication skills. If you're a barista, when you now get to talk to these customers, you learn communication skills, or you become a shift leader at say 18. Now you're learning about leadership and leading a team. Is there something you've been doing at school? Maybe you were part of the band, or you had to lead a group project that can relate in those ways and help make those connections. And so, blending in some of that language and some of that thought process with the managers and others really helps, I think. And we think, even think, considering that approach with the materials of training itself, um, to help bridge those gaps. Is most people will probably say it's easier to have a blank slate that you can go in. You don't have to unlearn, this is the way we used to do it over here, and all of that. But don't I just caution and say, don't consider it a pure blank slate, because you do want to help that person make those connections, and not acknowledge to them too that I see you, I
Yep.
recognize who you are and what you bring to the table, even if this is your very first job and you're, a junior in high school.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And forget about even, that age group, even older folk, people in any job,
Hmm.
there's this tendency to, well, you need to learn this thing, and I'm just coming at it from, you know, nothing about it, or you have no experience in your life that leads you to this. Whereas we have to do a better job of recognizing people's prior knowledge, prior skills,
Hmm.
because if you come at them with stuff that is irrelevant or they already know, you're sort of pushing that engagement needle back, and you're gonna have to fight uphill. But you come, like you said, oh, it's like, look, we see you, we get it, and here's where you need to go from here, and then take all those things that you know and either build on them or maybe unlearn them, as in some cases.
Hmm.
I think that just goes so far. It's a great way to put it. Is you think a blank slate is easier, yes, but nobody really is a blank slate, and we have to recognize that. I love that.
Hmm.
That's great. Um, Here's a question out of nowhere, but are you coming to Florida anytime soon? Do you have any plans, or are you already here? I live in Florida.
Screw's Coffee is in Florida. It's one of the
Where?
markets we're continuing to expand around on the outskirts of the Orlando area. We've
Oh,
got
okay.
some franchisees that are really and moving up towards north in going towards around like Tampa up and up near Jacksonville. So we've got franchisees that are expanding that area and really building around Florida amongst other areas. Southeast is a big market for us for expansion. As we move outside of where we started in Nebraska and Iowa, of course, you can imagine we've got tons of locations and continue to open. We find space. We are starting to branch out more across the country and getting into some of these other markets. Small towns are big for us. It's one of those places that people really can say, "This is my Screw's Coffee, and this is my barista,
Nice.
and the team that I like to go to." And you have those opportunities to drive those to drive building in those markets, which pairs along perfectly with the franchisees that are attracted to us. They're wanting to make that mark, pour back into the community that they're in. They want to open and support business in that community, not just because I'm going to come and make all this money, but I'm now going to be able to create opportunities for jobs for people. I'll be able to change people's lives in those ways too.
Yeah, well, I'll keep my eyes open here in Tampa Bay for that. And but along those lines, do you guys have a team or teams of people that you send around when you open stores, or
Oh,
maybe?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And we open stores on almost a weekly basis at Scooters Coffee.
yeah.
And we have a team of field training specialists that go out and really support the franchisees in getting those locations open prior to and staying, of course, for time after the opening. And they're based in different parts of the country that go out and support that. And then we have our team of individuals who support training from the standpoint of what those ongoing workshops look like, what are even the franchise owner themselves and training them when they join the organization, and let's train you not just on how to run a successful Screw of Coffee, but how to be a successful business owner.
Nice. Yeah, that's a big part of it too. Um, Going back to the idea of metrics and the things that you guys look at, is retention. I mean, I know that it's such a challenge in the broader industry, in that certain age group too. Is that something that you guys look at and like you're chasing? Have you sort of accepted the fate of the industry of this is what turnover is?
I will never say let's accept the fate of that. The QSR industry just has this standard high turnover. It just comes along with the territory. We are fortunate. We have franchisees who will have people. They will join them. Think again, 16 years old in school. They go off to college. They come and work on the breaks, or they may find a Scooter's Coffee and work at that one while they're over in school. If they end up going to school somewhere where there's a location nearby, and we have franchisees that support each other in that way. That hey, this person is coming out to going to be going to school over there. They're already trained. They already know the business, and they can come, work for a few hours for your store if you have some space for them. But thinking about retention, everyone tracks retention and looks at those numbers and what can we do to drive it and what can we do to drive engagement. There's some retention that just comes along with the territory, but then there are ways that we can impact it. And I think with this discussion that we're having right now around training is a big part of that.
Of
So
course.
it's not, we're always thinking it's the money. If this person is paying $1 more, 50 cents more, $2 more, they want to go there. We'll see time and time where that's not the case. We've got, I could think about the location I trained in, and there was a McDonald's that had this big sign that was right on the plastic on the side of the building around coming there and what they can make per hour working there. And when that sign went up, I remember the store manager just shrugging. It's like, oh, that's not going to be a big deal. She lost no people. She lost no baristas. She got people hired during that time, and they weren't paying the same hourly wage that was plastered on that banner. So it's not all about the money. It does have a lot to do with, though, how well that store manager themselves are trained and is able to lead the
100%.
team, as well as the training that the barista. So if you feel confident in being able to do your job, engage with customers, and continue to learn along the way, that can go a long way to helping to build that retention. And we at Scooters Coffee, it's important to have that, because a customer comes through the line and they see that barista on Monday morning, smiley face. Maybe they're going into a meeting that's going to be make a long Monday or a rough day, but have that experience, even if it's 30 seconds at a drive-through window. It can go a long way, and you want to see that same person again tomorrow or the following
Hmm.
Monday, or however often you come. And so it's important for us to be able to go, attack that stereotype, and really do what we can to drive more loyalty, and to get that turnover number down. And we're fortunate, we see, again, not having it exact, but due to joint employer liability, but being able to see, even through just kind of anecdotally and looking at numbers, even just through our metrics and the training system, that the franchisees do a good job of keeping people longer, whether they're
Yeah.
leaving, they're going to school, coming back. There's something around that, and I think part of that is being engaged with the team. You work for me, you don't work for this big, huge, mystery Scooters Coffee conglomerate. You work for me as a individual franchise owner in this community, in this area, and you're part of this community and the store success. And I think looking at it that way, and what we can do from a training standpoint to make those connections helps.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, the dollar per hour thing is going to affect a certain percentage of people, and mostly because they haven't had a lot of jobs yet. Right.
Hmm.
So that's the only thing they can really base about whether they like a job or not at that stage of their life is, well, I can make this, I can make that. It's once people start to work places and realize what it takes to be somewhere, and you realize in some cases the higher rate is a trade-off for, whatever, whether it's stress or difficulty or whatever it is. But the degree to which training, like you put it perfectly, is just if you can support somebody in a way that they feel very confident in coming in and doing their job, yeah, it creates a much different environment. And I've also heard a lot of different folks in the QSR industry say, listen, we know that ultimately not everybody can stay forever. That's just not how it is.
Hmm.
That's just not how it's designed. That's just not, what we're going to try to do. But we want people to be as successful as possible while they're here, stay longer than they might have, even if they're still going to leave. And then you're creating brand ambassadors in the world. And
Exactly.
it sounds like like touchy feely and like, well, that's just it's real. If you have a population of people who are like, well, I'm glad I got out of there. I couldn't wait to leave. And they're going around saying that. Whereas you've got a bunch of people who said, oh, this is great. I'm moving on to my next opportunity. But they're always going to come back for coffee and their
Hmm.
friends and their colleagues. I mean, that's priceless.
Oh yeah, I think that's when you've really done your job and met your responsibility as a manager, as a business owner, and you're able to create that type of experience for people. And we have individuals who work in our corporate office who started out as baristas. We
I was
have
going to ask.
franchise owners who
Yeah.
started out as baristas, and they're a franchise owner now. They've done different things throughout life, but they came back to the job that they had when they were 16 years old, and now and or came back to the job, meaning they bought into
Right.
the business later in life. And so, yeah, that type of loyalty to not just your experience and you having a good experience from the standpoint of a brand where, yes, I'll still continue to go and be a customer afterwards, that can speak volumes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. All right, we're coming up here. Any eyes on the future? Like, there's something that you guys are you gonna work on, gonna roll out something that you're excited about that if you can talk about anything. I don't know if there's
Oh,
just
yeah, yeah.
What do you got?
I think so. Going for the future is really a step back, and as part of something I've shared and recently having discussions with colleagues of mine at Chart and the Council of Hotel and Restaurant Trainers, that I have a opportunity to be a part of the board of directors with, serving currently as the president elect, and we've had a lot of conversation around getting back to basics, and there's tons of things around technology that's happening and predictions around uses of AI and how are we looking at through that lens and being able to build on those types of technologies and what's happening with more mobility and then the dreaded word of micro learning that continues to creep his head around there. But at Scrooge Coffee, one thing is we've taken a pause, and we did this. We're starting purposely right now with our store manager training and how they're developed and what we're doing with them. But we're taking this pause with the store manager training and doing a basics approach. We're bringing them into our corporate office, and we're doing a week long, taking what was a 4-week program, and we're training you in a week, and we're focused just on store manager training. Prior to your coming, you would have gone through, you can go to a store and learn how to make the drinks and things like that. But we're going back to basics, and we're in a workshop, and we're using flip charts, and we're having you practice counting things, and we're having doing some activities to try around what does fast look like and how do you train fast in your stores. And so we're in a world where, yes, let's use more hybrid and let's get more online learning, and get people on Zooms and Microsoft Teams calls, and those things are great, and that will be part of the model. And we're even looking at, as after this pause, where we're taking this purposeful pause and saying, let's bring our managers into a central location to do new store manager training. We're at the same time looking at how will we make this a hybrid model, and how will we do train to trainers, so we can allow others to train this workshop. Franchisees can train people within their organizations to do the same workshop. We are going back, we're looking forward, and I think this is happening. I've had conversations with others that people are doing that same thing. They're so COVID go back using the dreaded word of COVID-19 pandemic, made such it required us to take this approach of, let's get online, let's do more things, e-learning, let's do more of
Right.
that. But we have seen, and it was quick, and we had to do it, we had to adapt. But we are seeing where there is this thought of, let's pause, let's bring our people back in, let's get them connected back to where we are, why we do what we do, why we do it, who are we as a brand, and hear a consistent message around that. And so I think that's going to continue more as we continue to build more around technology and incorporate more of these other things that are coming. And it's, again, that's just part of how we learn. How can, let's also not forget the importance of that human interaction and having a conversation in a meeting room with a group of people, and hearing best practices from each other. And we've got managers that are leaving these workshops that appreciate the fact that they were able to meet other managers, whether they're in markets they're in or in different other places around the country that they met with. They got phone numbers, they text each other, they continue to have those conversations as they're continuing to learn on an ongoing basis through Zoom calls and
Hmm.
through e-learning courses and all of that. So,
Yeah.
and we are using AI and creating avatars and having that, and we are even incorporating it in the classroom environment. So we make that part of learning cool. It's just part of what that future approach is, definitely bringing back in the past what we can bring forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it can get overwhelming with all the technology that's available, and sometimes things tend to look like, we're using technology for technology's sake. It's just because it's there, and getting back to, how does this technology help people? Like, how is it going to help us as people? And I've spent almost 2 decades looking at learning technologies and focusing on that, but I've never been a proponent of getting rid of in-person anything. Right? I think
Mhm.
you watch a group of people who are in person, and the dynamic is just, at least in my lifetime, I feel is you can't duplicate that. So it's both, right? So if we're going to have people in person together, how do we make the best use of that time? How do we do that correctly and not just waste everyone's time? And then if we're going to use technology, how are we doing it in a way that makes the most sense and that people can actually get something out of it? I think that's great. I love that, back to basics, and that should be I feel like always the approach with technology is, how is this helping us with the basics, right? Or is this
Mhm.
just some weird add-on that we thought was cool? Um, how are we taking care of business? Um, all right. So, well, you've sort of talked about the future here, and I know it's a future at Scooters and the things that you guys are looking at doing. Um, I also do a thing on the podcast, the prediction time. So I don't know if that's right there is a prediction from you, but I usually ask if there's a choice of three things. We can talk about a prediction that should have come true, and we can talk about whether it did or didn't. We can talk about a prediction that is yet to come true and whether we think it will. And then you can make your very own prediction for the future, obviously all within the L&D world. But what do you think? And since we're already eyes on the future here, what do you want to do?
I think that that future prediction that I would give is as in this training environment and as trainers, how are we going to bring that human element back into training, or not back into it? I won't say that it's left, but how are we going to really build on that human element as we continue to use and learn more about technology that's bringing in there? I predict that there will be more companies who will say, hey, let's look at how can we have training that we can get managers coming in. Is there, how can we do these things? That's why we're seeing conferences coming back, and then there's still the opportunity to attend it maybe virtually. But even if you do, well, how are we engaging people that way? And our in my world, and what I'm seeing is looking at that. Even if you have the, if you're heavily e-learning, or if you're heavily live virtual training, whatever those modalities are, what can you do to create some type of human engagement even in that process, like person to person? Is there a chat system that's happening, even if it's a bot? And but it's still bringing in that I feel like I'm connected to somebody and something. And so I think cohort style training that's not nothing new. Is going to become something that becomes more utilized in the future. How do we get people together, get them connected, even if we're connecting them on a call every month in a small group for part of ongoing training? So your onboarding, your training isn't 1 week; it might be 6 months, and you're 6 months with the same group, and you're learning multiple things all at the same time in the same place in the same way. Even if that's virtual, I think that is what I predict that that's what's going to continue to become more of in this near future, where the way we look at training.
Nice. The future is human, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think the more that any business leader, learning leader, anybody, that whenever you're discussing something, writing something, and you're talking and you start to use words like, and I'm not saying don't use these words, I'm just saying when you're writing something, you talk about, well, learners do XYZ, trainees, employees, users. Whenever you use any of those words, just for a minute, just replace that with human or
Hmm.
people or person for a minute, just so you can read it and think about it that way before you go back to what you're doing, because that's what everybody is, regardless of what the situation is. These are all human people. And so how are we doing things that help people do what they want to do and do it better? So I love that. I that's my takeaway from what you're saying, is that the future is human, and that gives me hope. I like that a lot better than the future is robots. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, and I appreciate your time. So thanks for talking to us. And again, a fascinating look into like the nuts and bolts of how this stuff works and getting it right. So I really appreciate you sharing the scooter story with us.
All right. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right, thanks.